So this is one of these new Amazon vans. As you could tell, they're pretty big in size. This one's a fully electric one. I'm not sure who makes it, but we'll do a walk around here. And I'm going to explain why I'm not quite sure that electric cars are going to be the real future. And here's why. Because if you think about it, a Tesla, which is about the size of my little Subaru there behind that van, it takes the same amount of force to push my Subaru down the road as it does a Tesla. This van takes a lot more force. So if you think about it, the battery pack on a Tesla is a significant part of the weight of the car. And I couldn't imagine how much the battery pack on this van weighs as I walk around the fence here. But when you add more weight, it takes more force. That's just simple physics. So if you add more weight in the battery pack of this van here, you not only have raised the amount of force it takes to move this vehicle down the road, but you have also made it so this thing can carry less, because ultimately you can only carry so much weight on these tires and on this suspension. So if you put twice the amount of batteries in this thing as what fuel would weigh, or twice the amount of weight in batteries what fuel would weigh, you've lessened the capacity. I wouldn't doubt that the batteries in these things weigh about 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. And if you think about that, Amazon cargo probably doesn't weigh a whole hell of a lot, but you've lessened that 2,000 pounds that you can carry in this vehicle. Now this one is actually, there's a name right there. It says powered by Rivian. So obviously this is one of these new Rivian vans, but it's a gorgeous looking rig and it's a new electrical vehicle. But going back to that whole force thing, when it takes force to move this, your force is done by an electric motor and by the batteries, as to where this one's done by a little gas-powered engine underneath the hood and a 5-speed transmission. Now granted, most electrical vehicles, probably like this, have some sort of constant velocity transmission to allow the motor to get maximum torque out of its maximum torque and maximum efficiency, and make use of those batteries inside. But the one thing that this vehicle has over this vehicle, obviously it's sitting here dead, and more than likely it's because it's discharged and it won't move. But it's the fact that this one has reserve capacity in the form of fuel in the back here. And even though this thing may get like 25 miles per gallon, this thing right here, you pretty much got one shot. And depending on how much force it uses is how fast it depletes the reserve capacity of its battery system. So if this thing with no weight in it is good for 250 miles, and you double the amount of weight, you double the amount of force it takes, so you double the amount of output from the electrical motor in demands, and you have to lessen the amount of reserve capacity it has in the form of basically mileage per charge. So if you double the amount of weight in this thing by cargo, instead of getting 250 miles round trip, you're going to get 125. And that's primarily why I think that electrical vehicles are not yet the future. Because the other thing too is this thing may not burn fuel like this one burns fuel, but this thing burns fuel in another way. And the way that this one burns fuel is in the way that when you plug it in, when you go in and you plug this thing in at night, because it's got its plug right up here, and you plug that thing in, you're talking about energy that, instead of being burned on your road trip in the form of carbon, or in the form of a carbon footprint being burned on your road trip, the carbon footprint is at night while it's charging, because that power plant has to work overtime and has to put out that much more energy in order to charge one of these guys. And one of these guys probably is not something that charges overnight and not something that charges easily. But it's interesting because Rivian is a company that was kind of troubled, and I do believe it's the same one that Ford had on their list that they had invested in, and then they heavily divested in, or whatever that drama was with them. But anyways, it's just interesting because if you look at the whole thing, it does look like it's got some Ford components on there. Like the wheels kind of look similar to one of those Ford Transits. And even though it doesn't say it, you know, the body lines along the bottom here look similar to a Ford Transit. And the doors kind of look Ford Transit-esque. So, who knows? But, in conclusion, simple physics. The same amount of force it would take to move this down the road if you had a gas-powered vehicle, a diesel-powered vehicle, and an electrical vehicle is the same amount of force. It doesn't matter. It takes the same amount of force because they weigh the same amount. It's just the reserve capacity. And one of these is significantly less because the battery technology isn't there. And it produces the same carbon footprint because, again, you have to charge it at night versus you're not burning fuel while you go down the road. You're using its reserve capacity that you built up overnight. And again, the carbon, unless you have a hydroelectric dam that's connected somewhere, these are still charged by some sort of coal power plant or some sort of, you know, energy oil burning power plant that makes it, or even maybe natural gas burning power plant. But either way, it still has a carbon footprint no matter how you look at it. Until they figure out that nuclear energy might be the way to go, and they get better at making nuclear energy, you're still going to see a lot of stuff like this that's sitting right here like this one is, and like my Subaru, not running. So anyways, this is just my share. Catch you later.